So I'll go through a couple of little bits of code that it's important for everyone to sort of understand, just basic code, or maybe not always basic, but code that gets used in everything. I know a few of you guys are sort of racing ahead because you already understand coding and have some stuff, but I wanted to try and get through some more of the basics as well, just so we don't overtake those that have no experience too quickly, if you know what I mean. Yeah, so we'll go through a few of those little bits of code, and then we might just spend the rest of the lesson sort of talking about not coding, not making EAs, not with just using stock standard indicators that come with the MT4 platform. So just doing our own coding from sort of scratch, because there's so many actual indicators out there that you can use. If you can understand how to implement one into an EA, you can pretty much do any of them. And Aaron's already done half of them anyway. So, but even the little one we played with last lesson, just RSI sort of thing, it's just the same pretty much to use any indicator. So I think what's probably more important for, well, definitely for me and definitely for you guys that already have some experience, is starting to do our own. Like, because what I said in the chat group about things like any of the smart money concepts, order blocks, and anything like that, there isn't really an indicator that, well, not that I know of, definitely not an MT4 platform, that's going to give you that accurately. And I mean, smart money concepts is sort of, it's a trading strategy and technique and general trading philosophy that I fully agree with and get behind, but there's a lot of different facets to it, and each different facet's going to need completely different coding, really. So instead of just using an indicator to give you an indication, we need to come up with our own code to, like you were talking about Ben, with a fair price sort of gap. We need to develop code that's going to accurately define that. I mean, we can look on our chart ourselves and go, that's a fair money gap, or we can look at it and go, that's an order block. But to define that precisely, like with an order block, I would say you need some consolidation over a narrow range, and then continue the trend with a significant drop. Those sort of be the very basics to define an order block. Not just that's an order block there. You need to be able to clearly define it, and same with any of the other. Well, anything that you really want to implement as a strategy, you need very precise criteria in your head. So you need to not just sort of roughly call that an order block. You need to know precisely what's going to, precisely what criteria needs to fit in order for that to be classified as an order block. And then once you have that, and you can't do anything coding wise until you have it very precisely laid out, then you can start to implement that in code so that the EA is going to understand what that criteria is and know that that is an order block, or whatever part of smart money concepts you're implementing there. And then, once you've got that and it knows what an order block is, then you need to fit all the other pieces in as well. Obviously trading times, trends, current trends, things like that, and you can fit all them in together. So I think from a coding point of view, that's going to be, and from a trading point of view, that's going to be a better plan for us than just to go through basic codes all the time and just to use different indicators. I think we'd learn more and get a better result. So I shall share my screen and see what we can find. So just back onto the same meta editor that we're on the last few lessons. I have put all of that stuff Aaron's done in here as well. So if we end up talking about that, I've got access to that to share, no problem. All right, I'll try and not take too long because I do have a roast in the oven, but I can just smell it, so I had to mention it. Sorry, guys. Just first of all, at the end of that last lesson, we incorporated an RSI. So we've just made RSI value is just a name that I've made up myself, and I'm giving it the value of that. So lowercase I RSI, that is a MT4 code word, and so it's going to work out the current candle's open price. So on the open of that candle, it's working out the RSI value of the most recent candle, because this 0 indicates the most recent candle, and every candle to the left will go 1, 2, 3, 4 if you want to work on different candles. And so it's working on that current open price, and it's using 14, the last 14 candles as like the RSI is an average, so it's working the average out of the last 14 candles. And in this particular case, it's working on the 4-hour time frame, and the symbol underscore symbol means the same symbol. So you could do symbol H1, H4, same as for period. If we just wanted it to be whatever chart period we happen to have the chart on at the time, we just go underscore period, and it would do that. And you know you've got the right pronunciation, capitals and all of that if it turns pink or purple or whatever that color is. So that's what that is. And what if I was using RSI, which isn't something I use a lot, simply how this would work is if, you know, you can come up with different amounts, but it indicates if the market's overbought or undersold. And so if the RSI value got up to 80, that would likely be an indication that the market could pull back. So that would be an indication to place a sell order, and opposite if it was like 20 or less. But a better way to use RSI is not just if it goes above 80, but if it goes above 80 and then comes back below 80, meaning that the market is pulling back. Because if it goes above 80, it could continue to go up for a fair bit before that pullback occurs. So another way of doing this would be if we came up with, and we called it previous RSI value, and we could give that this value. And so we could do it exactly the same, but we're going to have a look at the previous candle. So instead of the current candle, we're going to work on the previous candle. And so now we've got two RSI values, one for the current candle and one for the most recent previous candle. And then we can just incorporate that into our code. So at the moment, it's going to open up a trade if there's no current orders. If the RSI value is less than an RSI input that the user would input. So we put in a RSI value of 30. Very incomplete code yet. So in this case, if the current RSI value went below 30, it would place a trade. So what I would change this to incorporate our new value there is if the if the previous RSI, so we'll change this to the previous one. So if the previous RSI value was less than 30, and the actual current candle's RSI open value. So the previous one was less than 30, so it had crossed under the 30 line, and we want the current one to then come above it, so to be greater than the RSI input value. So now it's going to take out a trade if the RSI drops below 30 and then comes back above 30. And there could be issues associated with that, which you would have to fix. But basically that code should work. You know, if one candle opened below 30 and then the next candle opened above 30, then it would take out a trade. Nice and simple. The next, I think for you guys on the call, that should mostly make sense if I explain that semi-clearly. If anything I say doesn't make sense, speak up and we'll just have a bit more of a talk about it. But I'm just going to paste a bit of code in here that I copied from here. Just let me copy this code again. And I'll paste it in here and go through it. This is just some code to apply a trailing stop loss. I probably won't get into this too much, but there's two pieces of code amongst this that I wanted to talk about. One was this for code, and fours are good for making, and they've got a few uses, but I wanted to talk about it here is as part of a loop that I'm creating. So it's going to keep looping through this little bit of code until it finds what it's looking for, or until certain conditions are met. And I use this a lot in a lot of different areas of VAs, because if you can imagine, if you've got several trades open and you want to make some adjustments to those trades, you want to loop through each trade individually. So let's say, for example, we'll talk about the trailing stop loss. You want the trailing stop loss to activate if it gets into 200 points of profit. So if you've got half a dozen trades open, you want to loop through them. You want to check the first one out and see if it's in 200 points of profit. If it is, you would adjust the stop loss. If it's not, you do nothing, and then you check the next trade and the next trade. And so you're going to adjust the stop loss, which is all the trailing stop loss is doing, is adjusting the stop loss to every trade that's in sufficient amount of profit. And how that loop works is this sort of code here is looping through. So we're going to start off with calling a variable count, and it's going to equal the number of orders there are open at the moment. So let's say it's 5. And then down here, we're going to set another integer, another variable called I, and it's going to equal count. So in this case, it would be 5. And then we're going to subtract 1 from it. And while ever I is greater than 0, we're going to subtract another one off it each time it loops through. That probably sounded confusing to people that haven't done any coding before, but for now, just trust me that just makes it loop through. So it's going to, and then down here, we're going to go if, because if there's no trades open, it won't find any. But if we've selected an order, so that just means that if there is one order open, I is going to equal the first one. So if we've selected an order and we're selecting it, order select has a few different options. One of them is select by position. And so we're selecting the position because we're giving that position name I. So we've selected that first trade, and we could have mode trades, which is current open trades. You could also have modes, different modes like stop orders and limit orders, but we're not talking about that at the moment. So that first if statement is if we have selected an order. Any time it wouldn't would be if there wasn't an open order. And then we're going to throw in a few new variables here. Is we're going to go also if that order we selected is also equal to the symbol that we're on and the same magic number, and the order magic number equals the input magic number, and their inputs we haven't added up here, but we add the magic number up there, which the software is going to attach to every trade it takes out. And this is how it's actually identifying its own trades, because if it selects a trade, and let's say it was a manual trade that you've put in, so it's still going to select it, but then on the next if criteria, the magic number associated with that trade doesn't equal the magic number that's attached to the software, it's not going to be true. So it's going to stop there, and then it's going to go to the else, and it'll loop through to the next trade. It's going to keep looping through until it finds one that is on the right symbol, which would just be the current chart symbol. That is the EA's magic number. And then if it's an order type buy, and then this is just our trailing stop loss criteria, because we want the stop loss to be greater than the open price to start with, because we don't want a trailing stop loss to activate until it's further enough up. So that's just a criteria for that. So really, if there are any EA trades open, this is going to come true. The symbol and the magic number are going to be true. And you could have either order type buys or order type sells. If it's a buy, it's going to modify the order this way. Else, if it's an order type sell, it'll modify the order this way. We'll probably have a bigger discussion on exactly how this works, but just, I mean, some people will have already been playing with code that has 4 statements in it already. And I just wanted to sort of explain a little bit. I'm not sure I did a very good job of explaining it, but through the chat group and everything, guys, if there's questions on this, if you take this code from this Zoom call and you try to implement it yourself and it's not making sense or it's not working how you expect, we'll use the chat as a Q&A and a fixer-upper of code sort of area there so that we can sort it out. And already there's people in our little group that, well, some probably know more about coding than me. So there's a few that already understand these functions already. So someone can definitely answer, no problem at all. The other bit of code I just wanted to go through tonight was this one here, which is OrderModify. Okay, so we've already, or some people have already made several bits of code. We've already talked about code, you know, the basic code where we're going to place a buy order. I mean, this was the order send function to place an order, and putting the lot size in, putting take profits and stop losses and all of that in place. So we've gone through that, and hopefully that sort of makes sense because it is fairly simple. Then what you can do after you've placed an order, you can actually modify that order if you want. So you could modify, I mean, you can't modify where that trade is, in like on what value you've taken it out, but you can adjust the stop loss, the take profit, and things like that. If you had a limit order in place, then yes, you could modify the position that you have it in. So OrderModify, we'll go through what that means through the MQL4 reference up here. And now you've got to select the ticket number. And in using this for loop, we have selected that ticket number and assigned it a value of I. So when we do an OrderModify, you can just put order ticket in because we have already selected it. Order open price. So that's what, let me move this across a bit. So what we're doing with OrderModify is we're not adjusting the ticket number. We've already selected it. We're not changing the order open price. I mean, it's already a currently open order, so we can't change the order open price, but we can change the stop loss. And what we're doing here with a trailing stop is we've assigned a value to buy stop loss. So this is just a term, a variable that I've made up, and we've assigned this value to it. And so the value we've assigned to it is, so we've got two, a buy stop loss and a sell stop loss. The difference being if it was a buy order or if it was a sell order. So if we have a look down here, it's if the order type was a buy, we're going to be adjusting the stop loss to whatever buy stop loss is. And that buy stop loss value has been determined by this code here. And this all of this here is just digits. You know, some pairs go to, you know, 2 decimal places, some go to 5 decimal places, so that the digits is just assigning the value exactly as it is for that pair. And the bid price minus the current stop loss is, you know, the stop loss is what we originally set for that trade. And so that's what we've put there. And down here, we put buy stop loss in. So when it comes to modify this order, it's just going to do this here. Else, if it's an order type sell, we're going to use the sell stop loss one. And I have just laid this out a little bit differently. All I've done differently is I've got the different. So you can put a line of code all in one big long line, or you can just put exactly the same code over a few different lines, just so it's neater and easier to see and right there in front of your face. So in this time, we're just using the sell stop loss to adjust it because it's a sell order instead of that. Anyway, so the main bit of code there I want to talk about, as I said, was OrderModify. And those are the different variables you can put in. So you can adjust the stop loss, the take profit. If it was like a limit or a stop order, you can add an expiration time or date to it, so that, you know, you put a buy limit order in, but if it doesn't activate in the next 2 hours, it no longer is valid, and it would disappear from the chart. And then you can change the color of the arrow associated with it and all of that if you want. So that's just something that some people may not have known about, the fact that the code can actually change an order once it's already placed. All right, so I'll just stop sharing my screen for the moment. And if you had any questions about what we just talked about, we'll do that now. And then we might not be able to do it all just on a Zoom call because it might take too long. But I was thinking, out of all the suggestions and things that people have put in the chat about what we should try and cover here, might not be the easiest thing to do, but I think it'll be of the most value and the best way as far as demonstrating how to implement code from just a strategy. You know, so you have a trading strategy, and, you know, the process to get that through to code that does it would be to do what Ben was talking about, and sort of Des was on the same track there as well, and try and implement that, at least in a very basic form. And then, well, I think it's always best to do it in a basic form and then put a few bells and whistles on to make it better after you do that. But I think if you try and do some hugely complex code all in one go, you've got to have a hell of a lot more experience than me. So I would always just try and, you know, so if you had a fair money gap, try and come up with some code that could identify that. because obviously that's a major component of implementing that strategy, is to be able to identify exactly what that is.
I
And
did have a crack at that, Les, on MT5 a bit before Christmas time.
yep,
I followed a video on YouTube basically to build some code that just identifies it. That's all it does. So
yep, cool.
it was pretty good. I think there was a bit of a glitch with it, like it would show some and not others, but it was not too bad and it was fairly easy to follow. So there's some
All right.
tutorials on Fair Value Gap.
Well, we
Code.
might share that actual code or something in a future Zoom, and go through how it's all working as well. I mean,
Yeah, no worries.
I think a lot of people can easily watch a YouTube video and copy that code and make it work. And that's what I did when I started,
Mm.
without really understanding why that code works as well. Everyone's got a different level of understanding of coding, of course, but um, for me, I was putting code together that I was just copying, and it worked. It did what I wanted, and I'd incorporate that into an EA, and it would be fine. But I did that for a long time before I really started to understand why that code worked. And obviously, understanding why and how that code works is important when you come to the stage where you want to really fine tune it a fair bit. And what I think it'd be best to get some of that strategy in place before we say too much. But once you get some basic code in that's identifying that fair money gap, for example, or just like that little EA I put up the other day, just identifying support and resistance, whatever it is. Once you've got code that's fairly well identifying it, then you can play it on the back tester. It's not even taking out trades at this stage, just putting a line on the screen where that is, maybe at the top and the bottom of a order block or a fair money gap or anything like that, identifying the main points of it. And then you can just watch it on the back tester, and you can see that, because the human brain can easily identify patterns and things, which is all trading is identifying patterns. But trying to get the code to do that, it needs a lot more. Our brain automatically sees a pattern, but it doesn't need, well, it's probably doing exactly the same thing, but almost subconsciously. Whereas with the code needs some incredibly precise criteria to be always able to accurately identify it, because things can be slightly different. Now, let's talk about an order block. It can be, you can come up with some criteria, and if it does exactly that, then that's fine. That's an order block. But that order block could be slightly different, meaning it doesn't quite fit the criteria you've coded. So it'll miss that one. So if you're watching it on the back tester, you can see which one it misses, and then you can see what you need to adjust in the code so that it includes that one as well. And then it gets a bit tedious, but then sometimes because you've adjusted the code, then it'll miss one that it was getting before because you've changed the criteria a little bit. And you try and get it as precise as you can, so it's picking up on as many of them as possible and as accurately as possible. And then you can get them to start placing trades as well and see how it goes. And then you just keep back testing, and once you've got it taking out a trade as well, you back test it, and you'll say, oh, I wish that one had taken out a trade, because that went exactly how I would have expected it to, but it didn't take out a trade. Work out why it didn't take out a trade, what criteria wasn't quite met, so it didn't take the trade, and you can adjust the code so that it can, and eventually end up with one that's taking more of the good trade. Whatever trading strategy you're doing, you have wins and losses, but the tighter you can clamp down on that entry criteria, the more wins you get and the less losses. So you get a better ratio of wins to losses. And as far as coding goes, that can be tedious and a lot of time staring at back testers and adjusting it and scratching your head. But you slowly refine it until it's, winning obviously more than it's losing. Like that little support and resistance one I did, I've been back testing that over 6 months, and on some criteria there, it was taking out 19 trades in 6 months and winning not all 19 of them. But the 3 months before that, it had like 4 losses. So you're never probably going to win all of them, and 19 trades over 6 months isn't very many either. But that's just off one pair. So if you can make it work on several pairs, then you're on a winner. And some pairs are going to suit certain strategies better than other pairs. Like I know a guy that's exceptionally good trader. Des knows who I'm talking about, and he uses smart money concepts and only trades Euro USD simply because he believes it fits those strategies much neater than other pairs do. But same with other strategies will suit different pairs better than others as well, and they'll suit different times of the market. So some will suit New York and London open times. Some will suit the whole London New York open. It just depends on what strategy you're doing to what times and what pairs suit best. And if you don't actually know what they are, back testing is definitely the best way to work that out. You'll run your code on one pair and it'll be exceptional. You run it on a different pair and it just won't work at all. But yeah, so what we might do when you get time, Ben, is write down some really precise criteria which you think the code would need in order to identify your fair market gap. I haven't really had much to do with that myself, so that's why you get that job. But not like the code you'd need for it, but exactly what needs to fall, exactly what has to happen on the chart for you to be able to identify accurately what a fair market gap is. So how long ago can it be? When can it occur? What sort of a gap? What has to happen before the gap and after the gap, and all of those little criteria that you need to identify what it is. Like for you to look at a chart, I'm sure you can identify one easily, but to break that down into exactly why that is what you think it is what we need to be able to start thinking about doing code for it. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I'll see what I can put together.
All righty. Anything else we want to go through tonight, do you reckon, guys?
Not that I can think of, but are you able to just put up so I can grab a screenshot of that trailing stop just before the call? I was actually halfway through putting
Yeah,
that
all right.
in.
I'll actually put it as a file in our chat group.
Okay, that's easier. Yep.
It's I think I've probably changed it a little bit, but it's probably not greatly different to a lot of different trailing stop loss videos you'll find on YouTube anyway. All it's really doing is looking at it, and if the stop loss that originally gets set is obviously going to be, if it's, let's say it's a buy order, it's I'm doing hand signals here, so I better turn my video on. But let's say it's a buy order at this position. The original code would have, if it placed a stop loss, it would have placed it below it. And your criteria for the trailing stop loss, you might want it to only activate once it gets to 200 points of profit. So once the market gets 200 points above the entry point, then it's going to activate the trailing stop loss and bring it above the actual where the trade opened, and then it's just going to follow along 200 points behind. That normal trailing stop loss stuff, you can also make them so that it'll activate straight away. And so this is a 200 point gap. Normally I wait until you're 200 points in profit, and then the trailing stop loss will activate. So it'll always be in profit. But you can make them also so that this is where it originally started, the stop loss, and as soon as it starts moving into profit, it'll trail behind. So if it trailed behind this far and then retraced, you'd take a loss, but smaller than where it originally was. So you can do trailing stop losses that way as well. And that's the only criteria. So then if the market moves up a bit, that code will recognize that and it'll jump up a bit further. But if it moves backwards, it doesn't follow backwards, it only follows forward. So there's code there to know that it's 200 points in profit. There's code there to know that you're only going to move that stop loss if it moves upwards. If the market moves backwards, it doesn't do anything, only if the market moves upwards. But yeah, I'll put that in the chat group as a file. That'll be easier and handier for everyone. You've put enough code in there for us, Aaron, so return the favor.
I've got plenty more done already.
All right, guys, I'll leave it with you with that one. But I know some people, some people are watching this live, some will watch the replay, but some people will not understand what that code we talked about today. So if you're one of those guys, have a little bit of a play with it. Put it into the meta editor and have a play with it, and typing it in and then making it compile properly. And if it doesn't work, sing out. And if it does work, but you're not quite sure about why part of it works, we'll sort that out through the chat group. Most of the people on the chat tonight already understand coding, so they don't have questions yet. But if you do, speak up. Other than that, I'll leave it with you tonight, guys. And I've got to go and get my roast out of the oven and get into it.
Yeah, thanks again.
Enjoy the dinner, mate.
Have a good night. Talk to you later.